Hello, and welcome to Play This, a Talk This podcast production. This week, in our investigation of gameplay as storytelling, we will be looking at Iconoclasts, a PlayStation 4 and Steam game from 2018 that was made by the blood, sweat, and tears of one seriously dedicated dude named Joaquin. If you've never heard of Iconoclasts, well, yeah, that's understandable. It's pretty damn indie. Although I don't know how you found this video. Anyway, let me give you the rundown. In Iconoclasts, you play as Robin, an approximately teenage-aged girl living by herself after the death of her father. She's an unlicensed mechanic in a society where that is severely frowned upon for complicated reasons that have to do with the theocratic, authoritarian society and, magic fuel shortages, I guess. However, when Robin is caught making repairs on her brother's house by the agents of the One Concern, she joins up with an EC pirate, which is the oppressed class of this world, I guess, to make her escape, and quickly becomes wrapped up in the behind-the-scenes mechanisms of the Concern. But are Mother and her agents truly as evil as they appear? I don't know. I guess. Complicated mumbo-jumbo aside, the story of Iconoclasts, in my opinion, has a lot of potential, even if it bites off more than it can chew with its one-person development team and a 12-hour runtime. However, more than the sheer number or weightiness of themes, I think the story is held back by its protagonist. Not because of how she's written, but rather because of how she's not written at all. The history of silent protagonists goes back to the beginning of video games, and if you're curious, I've linked some better sources with actual research on it in the description. But to sum up those accounts as I understand them, the silent protagonist was often a matter of necessity, convenience, or because there wasn't much need for a story in the first place. Link of The Legend of Zelda is perhaps the most famous example of the silent protagonist, except for that one horrifying time he spoke out loud.
Well, excuse me, princess. Hey, excuse me, princess. Hey, excuse me, princess.
However, while it's tempered by the fact that it's traditional, and with the caveat that I haven't played the game myself, I honestly think that Breath of the Wild's story suffers due to the fact he doesn't talk. I find the same issue with Iconoclasts, only to a far more extreme degree since its story is far, far more complicated. Everything the player knows about Robin comes from her brother Elro, plus 3 flashbacks to her father. The flashbacks really don't give much away, they're more about her father than about Robin, and Elro's understanding of his sister is filtered through his overprotective nature rather than being an objective account. Beyond that, we have to assume Robin's feelings and personality from her animations and a few dialogue options that are hardly sentences, and sometimes differ wildly in tone. Compare it to Persona 5's mostly silent protagonist, Champ McDude, which is his canon name according to Atlas. Totally official. Quote me on that. He only has dialogue options that he would actually say. You can get a sense about his values and personality from them. The same can't really be said for Robin. Obviously, Persona 5 and Iconoclasts are very different games, but they're worth comparing because of how they use the silent protagonist in a story-focused game that tackles heavy issues. In Persona 5, you understand what the protagonist feels about each issue and why, because you see his past traumatic event through his eyes and perspective, and understand how it shaped him. In Iconoclasts, you have no idea if the death of her father was even traumatic for Robin in the first place, because you only have Elro's word for it. You don't know how Robin feels about any issue. Persona 5, for whatever gripes you might have about its pacing, at least keeps a central focus with its main character. Iconoclasts feels disparate and disconnected because Robin seems to have no opinion beyond, "I like to be helpful." I suppose I could take this as Iconoclasts attempting to deconstruct that particular protagonist model, which does turn up in a lot of various media. Only it doesn't take it all the way, since Robin does succeed in the end, and characters praise her actions throughout. I think I would have ended up liking Iconoclasts a lot more if it had gone full tragedy, because at least it would have had a message, even if it was a deeply cynical one. But putting that alternate route aside, the message could have instead been clarified by just having Robin exist as a person rather than a series of pixels that the player moves. I've got to keep this series on topic, so let me tie the silent protagonist issue into the gameplay now. There's a part near the end of the game where Robin and Royal, who's been one of your party members and is the once fated Triangle Prince and successor to Mother, they go up to a rocket and try to stop the Star Worm, which is the concern's god or something, I guess, from devouring and destroying the world. Hey, as far as first dates go, it's at least a memorable one. At this point, 11 hours into the story, all I know about Robin is that she likes to help, or at least she pretty easily does what other people ask her to, I guess. I have no idea how she feels about Royal except that she wants to help. I, as a player, pity Royal and the crumbling of his entire self-identity, and so assume that Robin does on some level as well, I guess. Do you get that I'm not fully sure? Okay. They reach the moon. Royal fails to talk to the Star Worm. It destroys the station they're in, and Robin picks up the injured Royal as they try to make their escape before the whole station blows up. However, the doors in the hallway open based on Royal's presence near a panel, because the people who designed this place are stupid. And of course, the very last one has been blown off, holding on by the wires at just the point where Robin can't take Royal with her through the door. First off, this is bull, because Robin is a mechanic and has like a whole 2 minutes at this point to just reattach the panel, but whatever. I'll suspend my disbelief there. What bugs me more is that the solution is just to drop the suicidal Royal in front of the panel and keep going to the escape pods, leaving him to die there. And Robin doesn't say anything as she does it. Her running animation doesn't even change to anything more reluctant. She just does her characteristically cheerful skip bound away from him, where he's curled up on the ground. Once Robin crash lands back on Earth, her animations express sad, briefly, but it's back to the skip bound after that. Anyway, I have no idea what she's personally sad about. Killing Royal? The world imploding? Or did she twist her ankle in the crash? Who knows? Immediately afterwards, Robin re-enters her house, where her obviously traumatized and PTSD-ridden brother sits. He asks Robin to stay and ride out the end of the world with him together. Instead, Robin leaves, through player input, to presumably try and save the world one more time, without saying anything to him. Both of these moments are ones that I would be praising endlessly in another game. Being forced to physically leave a party member behind after making the choice to pick them up in the first place is a great way to use gameplay in the story. Physically choosing to try one more time to save the world over keeping your character with their family member should be powerful. Instead, both moments just kind of make me feel like a jerk, and not in a satisfying, full evil way. It's because they don't feel earned. And they don't feel earned because I have literally no idea what Robin thinks of Royal, Elro, or the world. There's an interesting interview with one of the developers of Borderlands 2, which I've linked below, where he expresses his regret at how lacking in personality the player characters are in that game. Apparently, testers didn't like it either. It was attributed to the fact that the Borderlands world is so loud and in your face, full of personality. Whether or not you personally enjoy that personality, you can't deny that it's got it in spades. And it was weird that your player character was the only one not to match that tone. Iconoclasts is the same. Robin feels out of place in this loud, opinion-filled world because she's quiet and has none. I think the game is trying to say that that's a good thing, that her simple-minded wish to help others makes her better or special, but it feels bad because it's that trait that has led her to messing everything up in the first place. The argument for the silent protagonist from an artistic standpoint is that it makes it easier for the player to insert themselves into that role. But it's really supremely hard to tell a pre-written story without a strong central personality. The voice of the player character is an easy way for a writer to tell the player what they should be feeling at that moment. Sometimes the writer hopes they'll agree with the character, and sometimes the writer hopes they'll disagree. But whether the writer is successful in their intentions or not, it at least provides a player a jumping off point to understand what the story wants them to understand. And that's not a bad thing. There's a lot of buzz over make your own story, which is fine in something entirely sandbox like Sea of Thieves, where there's no story whatsoever, just a setting, and its entire premise rests on you making your own fun. But in Iconoclasts, there already is a story. I shouldn't have to make my own from it. Another argument would be, well, it lets you form your own opinions. That's also fine in a story, but the writer should have an opinion of their own when they write it, and the easiest way to show that opinion is through the player character's voice. You can agree or disagree with the writer's opinion, but I can't even tell you what Iconoclasts wants me to take away from it. Silent protagonists, in my opinion, hardly ever work, and they definitely don't work in games driven by stories. The weight of leaving Royal behind doesn't land because Robin doesn't seem at all upset about it. Instead, I'm just kind of confused and pissed off. Leaving Elro behind doesn't land because I don't know much about their relationship from Robin's perspective. Instead, I'm just kind of tired of him. And the final moments don't land not only because they're hugely anticlimactic, but because at this point, 12 hours into the story, I have no idea who Robin is. Although, just like Robin, I do need a nap by the end of Iconoclasts. I suspect, however, that we're exhausted for different reasons. I'm so glad I finally got this one out because it means I can let myself play other stuff now. I do feel like I should say that I do still recommend Iconoclasts, especially if you're big on indies. It's a fun platformer with great art and great music, and there's a couple of story things that I do really like, and the premise is really intriguing even if it doesn't entirely deliver on it. If you liked this video, why don't you hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more content coming soon. Still coming are videos about perspective swapping, AI sidekicks, menus, and more. If you have a suggestion for a topic to cover, leave it in the comments. If you can't wait for the next video to hear more of me, check out our main podcast, Talk This, where my sister Madeline and I talk about different games every week, available for download on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Spotify, and more. Follow us on social media for updates and other fun content. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Talk This Podcast. Just check the description for all the links you could possibly need. So until next time, I wish you happy playing.
Hey, excuse me, princess.